I'm going to talk about Orexo, which is a company in the opioid addiction space. It's probably, I would claim this is the most severe health issue that is facing the US at the moment. It's killing more people than most other diseases, and I actually think in most other diseases, if you break down cancer, for example, I'm pretty sure there's not one single cancer diagnosis that are killing more people than opioids at the moment in the US. So Orexo, we are a Swedish company. We are originating from Uppsala. That's why we have our headquarters. That's why we have the R&D. Started up our US operations in 2013, and today we have about 80 people in the US working predominantly with sales and marketing. It's in Morristown, New Jersey. We have today 4 products that are generating or has been launched and approved. One of them we have sold completely. 2 of them are generating royalties, and then we'll talk mostly about Zubsolv, which is the treatment of opioid dependence, and the one that today generates about 85% of our revenues. As you can see down here, we have a strong revenue. So this is in dollars. So we're a little less than 800 million in SEK. We have an EBITDA which is 116 million Swedish kronor or $13 million in 2018, and we have a very strong cash position of 590 million or $65 million. So in basically where we are today, we are a specialty pharma company. We have products on the market, and the challenge for us now is to fill this pipeline with more commercial products, either through our own development or through business development. However, first I'm just going to take a little step back. For those who followed us know that there are something that's been following us for quite a long time. It's always nice to see that we're one of the best performing stocks on the Stockholm Stock Exchange last year, but it was not so much to the performance than to the decision by the court system in the US to finally validate and find that the competitor Actavis with their product are infringing into their patents. This has costed us more than 200 million Swedish or more than $20 million to run this process, and it's a big relief that we come out victorious and have found that our patents are now valid until 2032. People who know about this will know that when you've been through a court system, your patents are much stronger after they've been validated, especially when you go up to the higher court levels like the federal court system. It would be a big challenge for another company to invalidate them. The other thing that we have, and that cost us a decent amount of money now, both in Q4, and it will cost us quite a lot of money now in Q1, but then it will decline significantly, is that we found that the same company that we're fighting up here, Actavis, has actually used our technology to develop 2 other products, Subutex and Suboxone. So we, of course, want to get reimbursed for that or get royalties on the technology that they have taken, and we have sued them for damages in the US, and we have a court which is coming on the 25th of March is the trial date, and I expect it to take up to a week. It's a jury trial, so we'll get the decision imminently after. This is something that could generate a lot of money, but I'll also flag it is a court decision, and it's notoriously difficult to predict the outcome of the court system in the US. But we, of course, do this with the confidence of us seeing that they have infringed into the patent of our patent from, that's called 996 patent that expires in 2019. And if the court agree, then we are subject to a quite big damage claim against Actavis. So Orexo, as a company, when I started, the target for us was to launch a product in the US. It was to become profitable, to build a sustainable business model where we know we can generate income to pay for the development of new products. And that's basically where we are today. We are generating more money than what we need for our R&D. Right now, we're building cash, and that enables us to do business development more aggressively than we could do otherwise. So the focus number 1 for us right now is to broaden the commercial platform, meaning getting more products into the pipeline, into the hands of our field force in the US. To further strengthen this position, we are in a disease space where only less than a fifth of the patients who are diagnosed actually are in treatment at any given time. We're in a disease space where the number of people in treatment and those who actually have the disease is less than a tenth. So we have 10 to 12 million Americans who suffer from opioid addiction, but it's only about 1 million Americans who are in treatment. So we have a massive growth potential in the segment we're working. And that, of course, is a lot of focus for us to maximize the potential of Zubsolv in the US and continue to grow the EBIT, which is going pretty well in the US. And then we have our R&D pipeline, where early this quarter, we saw the first positive phase 1 data from the next project, but we have 3 other projects that I will talk to right now. So our pipeline, when we do pipeline, we're basically defining a problem, and then we're going out and see which technology solve this problem. Whether it's internal or external or internal is actually not important for us. So do we need to find someone who can do it better externally? We'll do that. If we can do it internally at a better business case, we'll do that. And what we have defined is today all tablets in this market that we are in opioid dependence is so-called sublingual formulations, tablets or films. You put it under the tongue and it has to dissolve within X amount of minutes. In all other disease spaces, patients normally prefer to take a tablet. You can take a glass of water and you just swallow. So we're aiming to develop the first swallowable buprenorphine tablet. That is difficult. Other companies have tried, but I think the other companies come from a technology perspective. Say, our technology, maybe we could use that to solve this problem. We're coming from the other angle. We have a problem. What technologies are required to solve it? So I think this one we have right now in vivo tests ongoing, so we'll see how that moves. But it is a difficult biology challenge to solve. Then we have OX124 and OX125, both of them addressing the overdose epidemic we see in the US right now. But the thing with the market in the US is people are not dying from heroin overdose anymore. They're dying from fentanyl. And when you look at the profile of fentanyl and compare it to heroin, you'll see that it's a completely different pharmacokinetic profile. So you need a different overdose reversal agent, something that is that's faster, more powerful, and have a longer duration. And that's exactly what we aim of doing with OX124 and OX125. OX124, we had positive data in our clinical trial early this year, and we have a product that has shown to be superior to the market-leading product in the US, Narcan, which is selling for about $150 to $200 million. So here we have a lot of hope that this one can make it all the way to the market. We have basically removed the clinical risk of this project. So right now it's more about commercial project and its operations, setting up the manufacturing in a competitive way. Finally, we have OX338, which is a product based on an old NSAID that has today is available as injectable. It's a ketorolac. And here we have done in vivo studies, and we are planning to do a phase 1 trial this year. So hopefully we can see that we have a product now that could replace morphine and opioids for people who have done procedures. And to give you a little scary number from the US is that of all of those people who took out a wisdom tooth, people are going back in a retrospective study and say how many got opioids after they got the wisdom teeth pulled. And it was about, I think, 45 to 50,000 Americans who have got the wisdom teeth pulled, got prescribed an opioid to manage the pain afterwards. 10 to 12% of those were addicted to opioids the year after. And the inclusion criteria was that they were not addicted to opioids when they got the wisdom teeth pulled. So their first exposure to opioids were basically when they got the wisdom teeth pulled out. And then they got opioid addicted. So can you find something that have a better pain-killing effect than the existing products that are OTC and can replace opioids? I think we are hopefully saving a lot of people from getting opioid addicted, and consequently breaking this curve. And right now we have more than 70,000 people who died 2017. Looks like being approximately the same number as 2018. So this is a severe problem. And reflected in the market development that we're looking at, we saw a 14.1% in the last quarter. We continued this year to see the same growth quarter over quarter, or quarter over year. So this first month of 19 over the first month of 2018. So we've seen an accelerating growth. In 2018 over 2017, it was 13%. The year before it was 12%. So we see an upwards going trend. And positively enough, Zubsolv, our main brand, is outgrowing the market on the 2 reimbursed segments, whereas in the cash segments, meaning patients who are paying out of pocket, we are losing. And that's basically because there are now 10 generics in the market with another formulation that are cheaper than Zubsolv. But when you get to those who get reimbursement and get insurance coverage, we actually gain market share, as you can see on this picture, where we are the only branded product that actually grows significant double-digit in the market. So looking at the way it has worked in the US, we have worked a lot through insurance companies, and every time we make a big leapfrog upwards, or even when we lose, it's explained by differences in reimbursement by insurance companies. And every single pharmaceutical in the market, whether being an NCE or like us, a drug delivery formulation, will need to consider how are we going to address the insurance market in the US. And as you saw early last year, we took a big jump upwards. We got Caremark, where we got access. We've been blocked for Caremark in 2 years, so we lost them over here. We got Humana and Envision as an exclusive, so we're the exclusively preferred product within those plans, and that gave us this jump. And then we're basically grown with the market. The dip you see here is the Christmas week, which is of course always is low, and this year there was very few selling days. Looking a little ahead in this market, we have a couple of new competitors. We have Sublocade from Indivior. It's a depot formulation that was launched. The Swedish company Camurus got their product approved in December. Then someone had missed that there was an exclusivity associated with Sublocade, so they won't start selling before, I think, end of 2020, probably with a launch 2021. Then they are probably going to launch a weekly depot in the interim. But we'll see how that will fly. I think there are a lot of arguments that the monthly depot is more attractive. But this one up here has really not made any traction. It's marginal. There's no impact. It's very few physicians who prescribe, and the market that they got is within a very few institutions in the US. So there's no broad uptake of these depot formulations. The big change in this market will be the last point here, and that's our major competitor, the elephant in the market, Suboxone, are losing their exclusivity, and we will probably see Alvogen and Dr. Reddy, now it looks like next week, are likely to launch a generic in the market into the US. You have 65% of the market sitting with Suboxone film, and with generic competition coming in, they're likely to lose most of that. And that creates a lot of interesting market dynamic, which of course can both be a risk, but also come with several opportunities. Just in a favor of time, I will not talk so much about the depot formulation, because right now they're really marginal for us. We don't see any of our prescribers who are using this in any greater extent. It is big institutions where we are not really present who have been starting to prescribe some Sublocade. So I jump that and go to the generics. And here's the interesting thing with the US market is that we already have 10 generics in the market. So whatever sales we have today is done in competition with 10 generics with the same clinical profile as Zubsolv. The way it works for the insurance companies is that unless the generics are going to do what we call a race to the bottom, where they basically launch below their own cost to get down the cost, they will have a big difficulty to get below the price that both Orexo but also Suboxone with Indivior have been priced for the insurance companies. So if you look at the price we are giving to insurance companies, we're likely to have a lower price than what the insurance companies will have for generics. Last week we saw the list price coming out for the generics, and we actually saw one of the large fee-for-service Medicaid companies in the US blocking the generic Suboxone film and putting Zubsolv in on a preferred position. So I think that will be interesting to see, can we convert some of this, because we are already competing in a price environment where we have generics, and these film formulations are likely to be more expensive than the tablet formulations in the market. And then, of course, as I talked before, what is important for us is, do we get market access? And when you look at the private insured plans in the US, so people with a private health insurance, we have nearly 100% coverage. We thought we couldn't get beyond 95. We got 97 early this year with North Carolina, Blue Cross in North Carolina adding us on a preferred status. The one that's been a challenge for us is Medicaid, and that's why we have seen a lot of the growth coming, and we've not really had the same market access in Medicaid as we have seen in the private insured space. But as you can see, we took a big jump upwards, and this is really where I believe contrasts what you would expect. But I actually think that here, with the Indivior losing their exclusivity on Suboxone, we have an opportunity to improve this number. Simply because our price to these insurance companies after rebate is likely to be below what the generic film are launching when they come into the market. Finally, on our numbers, so here we have the group net revenues is $84 million, so less than 800 million SEK, of which Zubsolv, the growth of Zubsolv, the growth in this has been 22% year over year, and Zubsolv is actually the one driving the growth with 28% growth. Our EBIT was $13 million, with a very strong growth from last year. Our US EBIT, which is quite interesting because that's what we call the core business. The US is what's going to finance our business in R&D and the business development. That's 22 million or 198 million SEK. So our US business is contributing with 198 million to our overall core business. So you could say, should we stop R&D? Should we stop driving these legal litigation processes? This is the profitability we would end up with. Interesting here is that we see this is going to grow and expand, not only driven by volume growth, but actually driven by significant improvement in our cost of goods. So we expect our cost of goods to go down with 35% compared to 2017, or about 20% compared to 2018. Finally, our cash position, I think this is what is needed for a company. I think most of the companies you listen to today are talking about how we're going to finance the pipeline development and when is the next share issue. But for us, it's really about how can we find places to invest this money into growing the business further. Just to round off, I think we have a little unique situation now. It's in pharma, nearly unbelievable. We have a 13 years to work with Zubsolv in the US with our exclusivity. We're in a market that is growing significantly, and we're doing that from a very strong financial position. So even though we see significant competition into the US, I actually think some of that competition can be converted into an advantage. And that's really what my job is. My management team's job is to ensure that we are the fastest, most agile company in this industry. And I'm pretty sure we are. And right now we had an ambition on the front page to become the world's leader in addiction medicine. Maybe not because of our own success of selling, but now because of our biggest competitors seeing generic competition. At least if we look at the branded products, we are probably on a good way to become the world leader with the largest branded product sales of any company. With that, I will open up for questions.
Thank you, Nikolaj. Very interesting. So obviously, as shown there you have a strong focus on contracts with the insurance companies. They who pay for the sales of Zubsolv. Could you briefly describe how this system works with insurance companies, and also why do they choose Zubsolv over generics?
So for most of the insurance companies, they have what you call an annual cycle. So you have to, every year, they come with a request around Easter, and you have to fill in what is the rebate that you offer. And you can place a rebate which is called, you often have the generics as one category, and then you have branded. And for the branded, we are bidding for what we call one of one brand. We basically are the only brand that is preferred, or we could be accepting to be two brands, or we could be accepting to have an open access. And then we're bidding for what kind of tier we are going to be in, and the tier means how much is the patient going to pay themselves. This is the one that is interesting with Suboxone, is that they have paid a lot of these Medicaid plans to be one brand, but when they have generic competition, they can't be one brand anymore, and that's what I think will be open up for us, because they will get into the generic category, and most of the insurance companies actually want to have a branded product as an alternative. And why do they choose Zubsolv? There are two reasons. One is that we do have a quite aggressive pricing strategy in these negotiations, especially if we can get an exclusive position. But the other part is that we have seen that when patients are moving from Suboxone to Zubsolv, they've seen the overall utilization to drop. And then we try to understand why, and the only explanation that the insurance companies come up with is that the patients actually got it overprescribed, probably to sell it on the street. And some patients might even got it prescribed without needing it, just to sell it on the street. And with choosing Zubsolv, as we're not as attractive on the street, and that's a longer story, then they've actually chosen us. And that's exactly the story with Humana and Envision. They choose us because they saw that this was a way that they could minimize the diversion into the street selling.
Okay, so and you obviously you have quite a few contracts already, and how important is the correlation between the reimbursement and your market share, the Orexo's market share, because it's been quite constant there, 5-6%.
Yeah, it's always amazes me that when you win somewhere, then suddenly you lose somewhere else. That's a little the situation right now, even though we have not really lost reimbursement, but we were taking off an exclusive contract, which have cost us a little volume with a plan called WellCare. At the same time, we got open up in Ohio. We see very strong growth in Ohio right now, but from a small base. So you kind of compensate the two, and your market share is hovering around the same number. If we had kept WellCare, then the Ohio would have been, as an exclusive, would have been positive. But there's no doubt, if you look into the exclusive contracts in Orexo, it's about half of the volume. The other half is in competition. But we see less and less exclusive. And the positive part is that when we have lost an exclusive deal, we've actually seen a lot of the patients stay on the brand. So even though they could choose another brand, they have stayed on the brand. And that will be with WellCare. It was the same when we lost the exclusive Maryland. We also lost the exclusive. Both of these will generate much more profit to the company after we lost the exclusivity, because the rebates are much, much less when we're in competition. So one thing is to steer yourself blind on the market shares, but I am getting a little more blind looking at the bottom line contribution. But of course, you want to have volumes so you can save money in manufacturing. But right now, we're shipping 400,000 tablets every week. 400,000. And that means that we're already up in the top scale of where you are in manufacturing. So I don't think we can save that much more for more scale in manufacturing.
But then, as you mentioned, your main competitor, Suboxone Film, facing quite a lot of generic competition now going forward. Are you at risk of then losing any of your existing contracts, would you say, or to be forced to lower the price?
I think, so I have to admit, and we write that in our outlook, is that we do see that there is an added market risk right now. There's an uncertainty because there's a behavior that I can try to predict based on logic. How would I behave if I was Dr. Reddy? Was one of those generic companies. We're talking to former generic executives to try to understand how they will behave. But you never really know. And there's that risk that you suddenly have Dr. Reddy and Alvogen starting to compete, this race to the bottom where they start selling below their cost of goods. And we've seen that before. And if that happens, you might suddenly have a price that is competing with Zubsolv or maybe even below. And I think it's not those, but then they might push the generic players who are with the tablets even further down below, because right now we are about the same price. And that in itself could create some of these exclusive contracts to say either you have to pay more rebate or we will open up for competition. I don't think they will take us off, but that they will open up for competition, of course, with half of the market share come from exclusive contracts could be a challenge. But then there are the more, I think this is the irrational thinking, but sometimes there are logics that I'm not aware of. The other factor is that if they don't, they actually come in with an average price, and that's what the list price is right now, is much higher than where we are after rebate. And you have pharmacies who are forced to switch from Suboxone Film to the generic version. Then there are no contract with Suboxone Film, and the insurance companies actually look at a price which is higher. And in that situation, there's an open field for us to create a lot more access, especially in the public space where we have not had the same access. And then on top of that, I can see the dream scenario is that should we also see that patients dislike the film from Dr. Reddy, and that's the first evidence we got. They were on the market for one day during the summer. Is that film not perceived as effective or bad tasting or slower dissolving? Suddenly you have a patient pull for another product, and the only branded product in the market is actually ours. So that is my dream scenario, a little higher prices, and the patients dislike that product. And then suddenly you have 65% of the market, which is up for grabs. Can we take 10% of that? Then we're more than doubling our market share. Is that possible? Absolutely. But I would say that it's really depending on market dynamics we are out of control of.
That was a dream scenario.
That was my dream, yeah.
What would be the nightmare scenario?
No, the nightmare is that first of all, you have two Alvogen and you have Dr. Reddy who have announced they will launch. You have Indivior coming with the authorized generic. But then Indivior have some settlement agreements with two other companies, Mylan and one more. And Mylan has an approved product. Should they decide to launch at risk as well, or have an agreement with Indivior that open up, so you suddenly have 4 or 5 generics, and you start to see this price spiral. And you see the generic companies with a tablet who's not in the film market lowering their prices as a response. Then, of course, we can see a situation where we would need to improve our rebates, which would put a pressure on price. And I must say it's not like we're out of business, especially with our cost of goods. It's going to be much lower, but of course some of that improvement in cost of goods will then be eaten up by higher rebates. And both of these scenarios are likely. So it really in the next couple of weeks will be very, very exciting.
Very much. We are running out of time at this point.
Jonas.
You will be able to elaborate further in the interview with my colleague Linus in a while.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nikolai.
Thank you.